You guys can start.
Welcome to the 27th Degree, brought to you by 27 Degrees Consulting with Chris and Nancy. And today we have Peter Alofsin with us today. Peter is a financial advisor at Capital Wealth Management. And today we're going to talk about just some current issues that people may be wondering about in relation to the kind of crazy financial times that we've been in over the last year. As a disclaimer, this does not take the place of any individual financial advice that you would get from your own advisor. So with that being said, Peter, welcome. And Nancy, why don't you start off?
Peter, I'll just start off with, boy, oh boy, have we been on a roller coaster ride lately or what?
Yes,
Anyone with an investment portfolio? I think I can't remember a time when I've been a little more nervous than what I have been the last couple of months. Mm-hmm. So talk about that a little bit. And what were your conversations with some of your clients when they were calling you and talking to you about what was happening? What common themes did you see, and kind of what were you telling them?
Well, the phone definitely was ringing, and there were really two common themes. The first theme was there was about half the calls, maybe slightly more than half the calls, clients just wanted to be reassured that do they have the right strategy, do any changes need to be made, and they just wanted to be reassured that everything was going to be okay. And I would say the second theme was we had a very large percentage of existing clients calling in saying, hey, I'm going to wire some money, I'm going to send in a check. They were recognizing that this was a temporary situation, and they just felt it was a good opportunity to buy in a depressed market and buy at a very low price.
Oh, for sure. So I guess I should back up a little bit. So when we talk about investment portfolios, let's kind of start at the very beginning. So you have someone who's just going to start investing in the market. What are kind of the strategies and some of the rules of thumb? Like, how do you guide a new client in that discussion? Someone walks through your door and says, listen, I'm ready. Mm-hmm. You know, I want to prepare for retirement, X years off. What do I do?
Well, the approach really needs to be, as you mentioned, that particular person is saving for retirement, for example. So we really need to get a feel for what their time horizon is.
Yeah.
What is their risk tolerance? What is their time horizon? When do they need the money? So you want to make sure that a person has ample funds for emergencies. 3 to 6 months income is a good rule of thumb, mm-hmm. just in case. While they could dip into some investments during that time, you do have market risk. If you have a portfolio that's invested more for the long term, it may be more volatile. Therefore, you really want to avoid selling in a down market. So time horizon is important, and also risk tolerance.
So when you say, like I've heard save up 3 to 6 months, is that expenses or income?
I would say expenses.
And how do you know whether it's 3 months or 6 months? Is that like, I have a job that has pretty stable income, I'm feeling good, so maybe it's like 3 months, versus I'm an independent contractor, maybe if I have like a lot of peaks and valleys throughout the year, I have to lean towards more of that 6 month?
That's a good question, and I would say if your income is less predictable and less steady, then you would want to be on the higher end of that. And if you are more, steady Eddie, money comes in every week, paycheck every Friday, you feel comfortable in your occupation and your position, then maybe on the lower end. I think I just want to add, there's a big piece to investing, whether it's your investment portfolio, whether it's your short-term emergency fund. Sometimes math doesn't rule the day. Sometimes it's sleep well at night. Mm-hmm. There's clients that we have that have 2 years in cash, and they just feel as though they just could not imagine ever having less than that. And that's what helps them sleep well at night, and that's what we do.
So our strategies, you talked a little bit about, the strategy is going to be quite different, of course, if you're 5 years off from retirement versus if you're 30 years off from retirement. I remember one of my plans when I had worked for an organization, and they just kind of gave you buckets. You were young, you were in the long-term bucket, you were kind of middle-aged, you're in that middle-term horizon outlook, or you got like maybe 5 years off from retirement and you're in like a short-term horizon. So what is that allocation look like?
I would say, regardless of where you are in that time horizon, I think every investor should have 3 buckets. I think there's the short-term bucket. These are funds that I envision needing in the next, say, 1 to 3 to 4 years. Then there's that middle-term bucket where these are funds that I'm going to need over the next 5 to 10 years, and then certainly the long-term bucket where it's 10 plus years. So even the person who is retired, for example, they're 60 years old, they're 65 years old, they decided to retire. They still need to have their investments segmented long-term, medium-term, and certainly short-term.
Now, let's take the example of like my son. My son's 28. And if he's going to come to you and say, what is there a rule of thumb out there? Like a lot of times we hear, if you can do 10% of your paycheck, that's great, fantastic. I've heard that a lot. Is that what you go for? Or again, does that lie in someone's comfort level?
It's kind of a little bit of both. I think the people that have been successful at investing and accumulating wealth have kind of developed a philosophy of doing something sooner rather than later. Mm-hmm. And let's make what we do allocate toward investments both meaningful and doable. For example, it's very doable to save $1 a week. It's not very meaningful. You can relate it to exercise. Hey, I'm going to get in shape, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to wake up every day and run 20 miles, and I'm going to do 500 push-ups every day. Well, that's very meaningful, not very doable.
Is that your routine, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. No, it's interesting. So Peter's my investment advisor. So we've worked together for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I've had before Peter, there were other advisors that I had. So there was BP before Peter, and then I guess with Peter now.
Let's make
hopefully
sure there's
not an AP.
Let's make sure there's no AP.
Right, hopefully not. But one thing I really liked, and I know there were rules and all of that we're talking about here and guidelines, but one of the things that I found really useful that other advisors didn't do was you really individualized everything. So Peter has to be a bit of a psychologist too, which is interesting. Not only does he have to calm down people who are anxious during these times, but he has to, I found he's good at, and this is what a good advisor can do. They can get a sense of really the psychology of the person and what their concerns are and needs are, and I guess what they're comfortable with, and individualize a plan based on that. Would you say that's true?
I agree. A lot of it, as I mentioned before, there's the sleep well at night approach.
Right.
And to the extent an investor is comfortable and has minimal anxiety, they're more likely to stick to the plan.
Right. And I had other advisors before who, their basic thing was, okay, you're going to save us, we're going to put this percentage into a mutual fund or whatever it may be. But it was all very cookie cutter. I didn't get the sense that they really understood what the goals were that I was trying to achieve. So a big part of it is understanding the psychology and I think the goals of the person. And that's, I think, what sets apart and a good financial advisor from someone who may not have what they need to do the best with most customers or clients. So.
You touched on a real key point, and that's having goals.
Yeah.
We need to help clients develop goals. If they have a goal, if they have an end game, they're much more likely to stick to the plan, knowing that it's a means to an end, not just I'm going to save money until I need it.
Right.
Too, there's like a lot of books that are written on millionaires and who are they really. And I think, I guess I'll talk for myself. Like, I used to think of a millionaire as this person driving around in a fancy car with a big house. And then you kind of learn, well, maybe these are the people that have the most debt in the world too,
Yeah.
Everyday Millionaire, classic book, right? That was written, where really a lot of the millionaires in America, anyways, are like that person next door that just know how to live under their means
Yeah.
and have done a consistent plan. They're not looking at get rich quick schemes, or
Right.
most of them haven't hit the lottery. They've just, like you said, they have a goal in mind, they do it, and they're really good at living under their means. I mean, even when I was working, we had some people that did not earn a lot of money but had 2 houses paid for because they knew how to like really manage their money. And I think that's probably key too. Is that what you find?
Absolutely. I think one of the things I've learned in doing this for over 30 years is that the people that you think have a lot of money, they really don't. They have a lot of toys.
Yeah.
But they don't have a high net worth. And we have a lot of clients who you'd see coming in and out of the office, and you'd say, oh, he must be here to clean the filters. Or they have a lot of money because they lived beneath their means and they saved money early on. You had asked a few minutes ago, what's an appropriate percentage to save? I tell my kids, if you save 15% of your income from day one, by the time you're 60 years old, you'll be able to have a lifetime of choices. You'll be able to do what you want, when you want. I've encouraged my kids to save early. I have 4 children. 2 of them are out of college and in their careers, and they're saving money.
And there's a lot of those retirement calculators on the internet, right? So you can see can you talk a little bit about compound interest and like how that works? And over the long term, it's like, as one of my patients say, boomba, you got all this money.
I've heard it said that I can't name the 7 wonders of the world, but I know the 8th is compound interest. So
That's great.
So interest on interest on interest is a very powerful thing. And again, if you just start saving early and often, I think you're going to be very well served. Compound interest, especially inside of a tax qualified account, an IRA, a Roth IRA, a 401k, a 403b, money is going in most cases pre-tax. So right away, depending upon your tax bracket, you're getting a return of anywhere from 15, 20 up to 40, 45% just by not having to pay tax on those monies. And then as that money grows and compounds, there's no tax along the way. So generally speaking, if you can grow a pile of money that's unencumbered by tax versus a pile that is not taxed along the way, plainly said, you're going to be able to grow a much larger pile of money because it's not going to have that negative impact of taxation.
So if we talk about someone Chris's age who's pretty close to retirement.
Oh, come on now.
Well beyond it.
Oh, jeez. That's really unfair.
So looking at his 4-year outlook
4 years.
towards only because you've been super successful. I'm not talking about age.
Oh,
Chris,
okay,
really.
Nancy, yeah, sure.
I'll switch it over to me then.
No, that's fine. I'm fine, Nancy. Go ahead.
So if you're about 5 years out, you're looking at, okay, maybe I should do some Roth conversions. Maybe I'm like really heavy in a 403b or an IRA account, and I don't have any other things going on. Like, is it ideal to have your cash bucket and your non-qualified accounts and your qualified accounts? I mean, can you talk a little bit about those types of accounts too, like when we say Roth or when we talk about traditional versus Roth?
So a great way to understand the difference between them is in any type of pre-tax savings account, again, an IRA, a 401k, a 403b, in order to put $1 into that account, you only have to earn $1 because it's pre-tax. If you wanted to put money into another type of account, whether it's a Roth IRA or some form of an annuity, or in the case of saving for education, a 529 plan for your children's educations. In order to put $1 into those programs, you might need to earn $1.25, $1.35, $1.45 to net $1 to then put it into the account.
Because you're doing after-tax money.
Correct. And then depending upon the specific vehicle, for example, a Roth IRA then grows and compounds year after year, no tax. As long as you use it for retirement defined as age 59 and a half or later, then all of those gains are not taxed. So you avoid tax on all the gains all the way through. A 529 plan is similar, except that instead of it being age 59 and a half to get everything tax-free, it's must be used for education instead.
So what happens if you have little Susie and Bobby and you have your 529 accounts and then they're not going to college?
That's a great question. It's a question that we get often. There's a number of choices that you can have. First choice is you could change the beneficiary.
Oh.
So whether it's to another child or to a grandchild, or actually you could change the beneficiary to yourself. And you could go take some classes. Another option is, let's say little Bobby or Susie gets a scholarship.
Yeah.
Okay. In that case, you can take dollar for dollar out of the 529 plan in the amount of the scholarship, and you won't have to pay any penalties, but you will pay tax on the gains.
Yep.
And then really the last scenario, which I guess could be considered the worst case scenario from a tax and expense perspective, is you just take the money out and it's not used for college or college related expenses. And in that case, you would pay tax and penalty, 10% penalty, on the gain portion only. Remember, on all the contributions that we've made to the 529, we made those with after-tax dollars. So there's no tax or penalty associated with that piece of it. But on anything that's gain or profit, you would pay 10% penalty plus the applicable income tax. That's the worst case scenario, which really, it's not that bad, because if you think of it, the money was growing and compounding all those years with no tax. So for all intents and purposes, you've grown a larger pile of money than if you just had it, for example, in a bank account.
Right. That's earning 0.01%.
Right. Exactly.
Well, even if the bank account was earning, and it's not, but even if it were earning the same rate of return as the 529 plan, you'd still have a bigger pile, because remember, you get that little 1099 at the end of the year from your bank that says you made X amount of interest. You need to pay tax on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So you brought up that 10% penalty. So I made a mistake when my kids were going to college 10 years ago. We had done a 401k, a 403b loan. So we took money out. My tax person was like, oh, this is a bad mistake because we weren't 59 and a half. So we got the 10% penalty, plus you're taking it out. It's not earning any more money anymore. And then talk about that scenario, because we had looked at it almost as like a second bank account if we needed the money, and that was the wrong way to look at it.
This is a conversation that does come up often, and in addition to working personally with clients and families, in our firm we also work with companies in their company 401k plans, and we consult with the participants in the plan, and we encourage the participants in the plan to assume that any money that they put in is not to be touched till 59 and a half. Do not touch it. Don't put the money in assuming that, okay, when December comes, I'll take out a loan to do my Christmas shopping. It's not a Christmas club. It's not a deferred spending account. This is long-term savings account.
Right.
Okay? To pull it out for education, I would have advised you against it. I would have said, take loans out in the children's name, let them pay for it. I think one of the best things we can do for our kids is to be financially independent ourselves. So to the extent someone spends all of their income, all of their monies, all of their 401ks on their kids' educations, and I've seen it happen. What do you think's going to happen when they're 65 or 70 years old? They're moving in with their kids.
Yeah, they're a burden at that point.
Exactly. So again, I think the best thing that parents can do is be financially independent themselves.
That's great
But again,
advice.
it's
hard to do. It's hard to do, but it's important. And they also have to have that. You want to instill in them that sense of responsibility too. So I think it's good for them to have some skin in the game.
No
so to
question.
speak. I mean, at that point, then they understand there's a real value to this education, and it costs something, and money is real. It's something that you have to work for. It's not something that's just given to you.
it's not an entitlement.
Right. Exactly.
Well said. Well said.
So can I just? I'm curious about one thing. So this comes up sometimes. I'm sure you've run into this. People say, "Look, I just don't have anything to invest. I just have enough to pay my bills." How do you deal with that? I mean, what advice would you give people like that? So we're talking more about, how do you manage your money at this point, really, I think.
The first thing I'd say is, regardless of income levels, there are people who say that, whether they earn minimum wage or whether they're earning, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year and they're living above their means. It's really not I can't afford to. It's, am I living above my means or beneath my means and saving money?
Good point.
I've shared this story of meeting with a 401k participant who said that they just couldn't save money. They just didn't have the income. And I said, well, I notice you have one of those Great One coffees there sitting with you. I said, how much does that cost? And they said, well, it's, $5. And I said, and do you leave a tip? They said, oh yeah, I'm a good tipper. I leave $2 every time. I said, how many of those do you have a day? They said, well, I get one on the way into work and I get one after lunch on my way back to the office. I said, okay, so there's, $14 a day times 5 days a week. I disagree. I think you can save money. I think it's just a priority. Again, I said earlier in our broadcast that the people who have been successful at saving and accumulating wealth have been those who have adopted the philosophy of doing something sooner rather than later, and something that is both meaningful and doable.
I think that's a great point, and I'm glad that you brought it up, Chris. And I think, what was eye-opening for John and I, my husband, was we sat down and actually did a budget. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people just don't budget, but really tracking every expense is an eye-opener.
Let me guess. You couldn't understand where the money went at the end.
Well, it was just something where we had a goal. We wanted to save up for something. And I'm like, well, how fast can we get it? So that was kind of what urged us to kind of do the budget. We were spending hundreds of dollars going out to eat that we had no idea of, and it was, and it wasn't we were going to fancy restaurants or anything. I mean,
Just
you're
adds
talking
up.
Little sub shops or something. And it was like crazy the way it added up. Dunkin' Donuts and
the little incidentals we don't think about. It's interesting. Any successful business has a budget that they run by. They have a business plan. They have a budget. But
unless you're a government agency.
Unless you're a government agency, then you have this open pocketbook. But we won't get into that.
I thought we weren't going to talk about politics.
I apologize. I promised I wouldn't go there.
All right, but we should be doing that in our lives, right? We should have household budgets, and we should think about where we're spending our money. And a lot of times, you're right, people don't do that. But if we do that, we do find out, it's really eye-opening. You find out how much money you waste on things that you probably don't need, and that money could be put into savings for the future.
And I think there's some great apps out there that make it so easy now. You have Mint, you have every dollar.
There's an app for everything.
Oh my God, there really is.
I remember as a kid, my mom quitting smoking, and my mom had smoked for years and years and years, and she went to this organization to quit, and then I remember it was kind of weaning them off cigarettes. But I remember one of the final stages of it was, I think my mom used to smoke a couple of packs a day. Salem's, I remember. But what she would do is every day after she quit, she would take the equivalent of 2 packs a day and she would put it in a mason jar.
Yeah.
And it was mind-boggling how at the end of a month she had this big pile of cash that she was spending on cigarettes. And whether it's cigarettes or Dunkin' Donuts coffees or dinners out,
That's a quick.
it's don't just pay attention to going to dinner. The night that you don't go to dinner, take $50 or whatever the number is and put it in a jar somewhere. And at the end of the month, go put it in the bank or go, open up an investment account.
I know we have a mason jar right on our
Yeah,
counter
it's
to this
great
day.
advice.
Old
We
school.
just for the
Old school.
silver and for the pennies, you know. But yeah, it just
great
it adds up pretty
It really
quick.
does.
So the 10-year-old kids, the 12-year-old kids, what are great ways to start them like saving and thinking about money in a real healthy way?
That's a great question. I haven't had that question too often, but I would say that starting early is not a bad thing. My youngest son, who's still in high school now, came to me the other day and said he wants to start saving and investing. And so I wanted to say with what money, but he caddies and he actually has money. So there's programs out there. I think Charles Schwab has a program called Slices where you can buy very small fractional shares of things like, Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google, those companies in $5 increments. And so he's in the process of opening an account. And saving is a habit like anything else. You need to get in the habit of doing it.
Right.
Whether it's if your 10-year-old has an allowance. Again, it's my youngest is 18 years old, so I don't know what allowances are like these days. But if you're giving your kid $10 a week or something like that, you need to say, okay, well, we need to put some away for taxes.
Yep.
We need to put some away for savings. We need to put some away for charity, and then you can spend the rest. And I think you can feel good as a parent. I think they can feel good. I think we can feel good as investors if we were to segment our money that way, and then feel really good about spending what's left and enjoying and say, okay, we're only going out to dinner one night this week or 2 nights, depending on what you were doing. So
Right.
it's about segmenting that money and knowing in advance every dollar that comes in is spoken for in some form or fashion.
My youngest daughter got her first summer job this year. It was really eye-opening for her. So when she got that first check, there were a couple things that she was excited about. And a couple
I think
things
I know
she
where we're
wasn't
going with this.
excited about. Well, she was excited that she made money, of course, and that was a great thing for her to understand that she could work and get a return on it. But then the tax part of it, she was just astounded that, wow, why are they taking this from me? Why is this not coming to me? But it's really interesting. So she's learned now to start to save, and she's learning the value of money. I think that's one of the really important things we can instill in our children. It's important because we do that to set them up so that as they go on in life, they can be independent and they can do what they need to do to be, successful in life. And it's not just all about money being successful in life, but it's important for them to understand the value of it so they can have that independence.
I agree, and I think that's one of the best things we can do as parents is prepare our kids for adulthood.
Yeah.
And we've all been around long enough to know that whether it's a relationship, a marriage, or whatnot, money is a thing. And to the extent that they have a good relationship with money, with respect to savings and investing, and if there's any charitable inclination, taxes, that they fully understand. And I think that can help may mitigate some of those issues that bubble up from money.
Yeah. And I like the charitable part is important too, to understand. She was really moved by what happened recently in Lebanon with the explosions. So she took some of her money and she wanted to send some. So we found a way that she could do it through the American Red Cross. But I think doing those things are important too, so that they understand the value of what their money can do. You mentioned living below your means or at your means, certainly not above. That's an important tool, I think, that we have to teach our children. You didn't think this was going to be a parenting show, did you?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't.
Well, we don't know.
Just don't call my wife.
We never know what direction this is going to go on. When we do these
kids
talks,
are like little
but-
sponges. They
Yeah.
pick up your habits and they pick up your
Right.
discussions too. And
Right.
I think not only with the focus on kids, but with the focus on your significant other too. It's like I think you have to be on the same page. It makes life so much easier when
Sure.
you're not. I think money discussions are the number one cause of divorce in America, right? People divorce the highest because of money arguments. So I think if you can have those conversations and you're on the
That's why
same
I let my wife
page-
have whatever she wants.
You might need to talk to John after the show. but it's good, and it's a double check on you too. It's like, because I can get pretty impulsive sometimes, and John's like, well, we might have had this goal, and that would kind of put us on a little bit of a different path, and it's like, what's your vision, and kind of stick to it, like you were
There-
talking about your end game.
Yeah, there's that word again, goals.
Right.
Yeah.
You need to have a plan. I think it was Yogi Berra who said, if you don't know where you're going, you'll probably end up somewhere else. So
Right.
if you have a goal and it's meaningful and you're committed to it, you're much more likely
Right.
to accumulate, if it's a financial goal, your objective versus if you didn't have a goal.
Right.
Yeah,
No,
chances are you're not going to wander into wealth.
Well, every time you make the decision to not go to dinner, in your case, you can. Wow, what a
No,
great
in my
decision.
case, it'd be not to buy a pair of shoes. The dinner was my husband.
Yeah. Her nickname
We're not
is
eating tonight. I'm getting new shoes.
Exactly.
Yeah, there you go. Right.
I want to
Nice.
get back to what you said too, though, about
Sure.
your daughter with the paycheck and
Yeah.
what comes out of your paycheck. That you look at it and you're like, oh. So one thing that comes out of your paycheck is Social Security. So, and I'm sure you get this question a lot. When should I take my Social Security? 62, 65, 67, 70? When?
There is again, if you need it, you got to take it. There's a table out there, and it actually is sitting in the drawer of my conference room, and we bring it out for meetings. But just for the viewers who might not fully understand what we're talking about. If my normal retirement age, my full retirement age based on my year of birth is age 67. So at age 67, I can get my full Social Security benefit. I can take it as early as age 62, but there's a decrease in every year prior to age 67 in what my benefit would be. So part of the analysis is how long do I have to live to break even from taking it early versus taking it at age 67? Because again, if I take it at age 62, that's 5 years of collecting a benefit. So I'm going to have to live a period of time beyond that to even break even. So that break even point is in your kind of late 70s, early 80s. And that does not take into account the opportunity cost of what I could have earned by, in other words, if I leave my money in my investments and I take Social Security, my investments are growing by a certain amount.
Right.
So we, again, if they don't need the money, that's definitely a factor. But we tend to err on the side of taking it early. You never know what tomorrow brings.
Right.
Have dessert first. You never know.
That's true.
Do that. I eat dessert with my meal.
I eat mine before my meal.
Oh, that's even better. So I wanted to ask you another question geared towards the retirement and looking at 5 years out or when you're ready to really focus on retirement.
Mm-hmm.
What's the tax liability strategies? So if I just have, for instance, if I have all my money into a 403B, which has been tax deferred, now I go to take money out of it and I get hit with, you got to pay taxes as soon as you withdraw it.
Mm-hmm.
Or I have all my money in a 403B and now the required minimal withdrawals that I have to do, it's all coming out of there and it's a big pot and I haven't put that money into anything else to lower that number for me. So how do I in retirement make the best tax strategy that I can?
So in that example you gave, all of your money was in the 403b. So you don't have a choice. So when you pull the money out, you're going to pay taxes at that time. Okay? If you had, at a younger age, established some goals, and let's say those goals led to an amount of money that you need to save each year to reach your retirement goal, there's a limit. There's a statutory limit from the IRS as far as how much you can put into a 403b or a 401k. So your savings objectives may have you max that out and then have to put the money somewhere else. So when we do cash flow modeling for clients in retirement, as a general rule, we try to be as tax efficient as possible. So we're going to take from the pile that has the least amount of taxes due, so as to minimize the tax impact. So if you had a 403b and you had a Roth and you had money in the bank, and maybe you just had an individual investment account or a joint investment account with your husband with after-tax dollars, in that scenario we would probably go to cash first. We would then maybe go to the Roth account, and then after that we would go to the joint investment account, and only when we have to would we reach into the 403b. Again, we want to minimize the tax impact.
So is it opportune now with everything going on to do some Roth conversions too?
There's a little bit of a cynicism in me with respect to Roths. If you recall, when Social Security first came onto the scene, it wasn't taxable. And now, as much as 80% of your benefit can be subject to tax depending upon your income level. So I like pre-tax first because I know that's a benefit that I have right now. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. As far as the conversion goes, so Nancy, just to reiterate what you're talking about, is there is a provision in the tax code that says I can take my 403b or my regular IRA and I can convert that to a Roth. If you convert it to a Roth, you now pay tax on all that money right now. I think the IRS allows you to spread that tax over 2 years if you do a Roth conversion. But even still, let's say you had $100,000 in an IRA and you convert that to a Roth, you've just added $100,000 to your income this year, which for all intents and purposes is probably going to put you into a higher tax bracket. You're going to pay a big chunk of that. Again, let's do the analysis of how many years do I have to live before I make up for that big tax hit that I took in 1 year. So generally speaking, I'm not a fan of the Roth conversion. I do get the question a lot with 401k participants because in today's world, many 401k plans or 403b plans do have a Roth option. So there's still the limit on how much you can put in, but you could break it down between some Roth and some traditional 401k or 403b where there's that pre-tax element to it. I can argue both sides against the middle on that one. So what we typically will recommend is, why don't you do some of both? I think balance is good.
Right. So you brought up another interesting point too. So when someone's, maybe just starting their job, signing up for their 403, or even if they haven't invested and they're looking to start an investment portfolio now, they're at their company and they have the match and they have options whether to do a 401k or a Roth 401k, which I guess a couple of years ago companies started doing within the 401k plan. What options should they pick? Or like you said, can they do a little bit of both?
First of all, I would say in the situation where there's a company match, by all means, don't leave any money on the table. Yeah. If they're willing to match up to 5%, don't put 3% in. You're leaving money on the table. I always tell 401k participants when we do a group presentation, raise your hand if you're in the room here and you're not participating in the 401k. And certainly there's going to be some hands going up. To which I will say, keep your hands up if you want a 5% raise right now. Of course, all the hands stay up. I say, well, there's a caveat. You need to put at least 5% into the 401k, and your employer is willing to match that. So certainly, don't leave any money on the table. The second thing is, I think if the biggest concern you have is which bucket to put it in, that's a good problem to have. Do I do Roth? Do I do traditional 401k? No one ever went broke saving money. So I think if you're undecided, again, I'll go back to balance. I'll put some in each bucket. And then as far as maybe where to invest that, because if you're a new investor, hey, do I put it in this fund or that fund? Many 401ks you'll have access to an advisor like myself. But I would say almost all 401ks now have these age-based or target date retirement accounts where you can say, okay, I'm 35 years old now. I'm going to be 65 in 30 years. Therefore, I'll put it in the 2050 fund. Yeah. And that fund will be automatically allocated to be more growth-oriented while you're in your accumulation years. And then it will take the foot off the gas a little bit and be a little more income-based as you coast into retirement.
Peter, so just some take-home messages. We can probably move on to that now because I think we're getting towards the end of the time.
Sure, yeah.
What would you say if you were going to say take-home messages, the best things you can summarize that someone can do, and the worst things, the worst mistakes someone can make?
So I would say the best thing that someone could do, regardless of whatever level of income they're at, is to live beneath your means and save some money. Mm-hmm. I think no one's ever regretted that. No one ever got to retirement and said, I wish I saved less.
True.
And I think the biggest mistake, it's easy to say, but don't do that. Don't not do that. Don't take money from your long-term savings. Save your money.
Right. And then, and pretty much, unless you're in a really dire situation, you can probably look at your income and find ways that you can pull money out that you're spending needlessly and save some. In most instances.
Nancy, you brought up, you sat down and did a budget. Do the budget. See where your money's going. I think if you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
Right.
So get a really good idea of where you're spending your money. And you may say, I'm spending, a fair amount of money in this one particular category. That's the big place to start. Let's take a look at where we spend most of our money, and let's see if there's any room to trim some fat in there, and maybe we can save a little bit more money and not even really affect our lifestyle. One of the things I've told individual 401k participants, if maybe they can't save, or maybe they're only saving 1% or 2%, and I'll say, why don't you push it up to 3% and just see what happens? Just commit that for the next 2 months or 3 months that you're going to not change it no matter what. And if I come back here in 3 months, this is what you're going to say to me. You're going to say, for the first paycheck or two, I kind of felt it. And after that, I didn't even notice it. Great. To which I'll say, well, why don't we go up to 4% then and see what happens? And I think people will find out where that sweet spot is, where they're able to save, that it's both meaningful and it's doable and it's not impacting their lives too much. I don't think there's a huge impact on people's lifestyles when they choose to save just a little or none at all or a significant amount. It's about developing the habit of save first, spend second.
So Peter, how do people get in touch with your company if they're interested in using you as a resource?
Probably the easiest thing to do is just go to our website, capitalwealthllc.com. We're located in Rhode Island over on the East Greenwich, West Warwick line. All of our contact information is right there on the website. Pretty easy. Give us a call. We'd love to hear from you.
Great.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this was great. It was really a really enlightening conversation. Really very good. Very good.
Thank you.
So to wrap up, I'm kind of curious over what song
All right,
you decided on.
Peter got a little nervous when he knew about this, so it's become a tradition that I do a song. So I tried to think of a money song. You know, there aren't a lot of money songs out there. It's really funny. There's a lot of songs about love. There's not a lot of songs about money. So
Unless you love money.
unless you love money, I guess. But you know, there were a few songs that came to mind. There's an Elvis song, "Money Honey," but not many people know it, so I didn't do that. There's nothing, "Money for Nothing" by Dire Straits, but that's
the one I was thinking.
really more of an electric song. And then there's "Money" by Pink Floyd, also not really conducive to acoustics. So Nancy, she's very brilliant. She came up with this idea.
Smiling.
So,
I know you can't tell me how to
so
dance.
we'll see how this goes. Now I learned this kind of last night, so I have no idea how this is going to go. It's really hard singing through a mask. I'm going to also say that too. Oops, what did I say? Oh wait, let's put the capo in the right area. Okay, let's try this again. If I had $1 million, if I had $1 million, I'd buy you a house. I'd buy you a house. If I had $1 million, if I had $1 million, buy you furniture for your house. Maybe not Chesterfield or an ottoman. If I had $1 million, if I had $1 million, well, I'd buy you a K car, a nice Reliant automobile. If I had $1 million, I'd buy you a love. If I had $1 million, build a tree fort in our yard. If I had $1 million, you could help, it wouldn't be that hard. If I had $1 million, maybe we could buy a little fridge in there somewhere. You know, we could just go up there and hang out. If I had $1 million, if I had $1 million, well, I'd buy you a fur coat, not a real fur coat, that's cruel. If I had $1 million, if I had $1 million, well, I'd buy you an exotic pet, yep, like a llama or an emu. If I had $1 million, if I had $1 million, well, I'd buy you John Merrick's remains, ooh, all those crazy elephant bones. If I had $1 million, oops, I'd buy you love. I messed that up a little. It's all right. If I had $1 million, wouldn't have to walk to the store. If I had $1 million, we'd get a limousine 'cause it costs more. If I had $1 million, we wouldn't have to eat craft dinner, but we'd eat craft dinner. Just live within our means, right?
You just learned that last night.
I did,
Well
yeah.
done.
That was
Well
awesome.
done.
Oh my God, it's so hard to sing through this mask. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And Peter Alofsin, Capital Wealth Management. Look him up on the internet. I've used Peter for years, and he's
Thank
really
you.
helped me out quite a bit.
Thank you very much.
And we're really happy to have you here, Peter. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
This is
was
great.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you for coming, Peter.
Thank you.